This video is sponsored by Linode. Build your next application or website with Linode's next generation network. Linode lets you pay as you go, as you can fearlessly scale up or down at one of 11 global data centers. To get $20 towards your new account, visit linode.com/Traversy. Hey, what's going on, guys? So about a week ago, I posted a tweet asking if anyone had small projects, personal projects that they'd like turned into a tutorial, and I got a bunch of submissions. I have a whole Gmail folder just packed full of them, so I'll be going through those in the coming months. But today we're going to use one of those, and this is a calendar application that we're going to build with Vue.js, Beautify, and Firebase. And this is from JS Fanatic, so I'll put this link in the description to the repository with the code. But basically, we're going to build a calendar using the Vcalendar Component, and we're going to add Firebase as a backend. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Beautify, it's a material design framework, a UI framework for Vue.js. It's similar to Material UI for React, if you're familiar with that. And if we go to the documentation here, we go down to we're going to go down on the side to UI components and calendar, which is right here. It gives us just a full-fledged calendar in the UI. Now, obviously, there's no back end to this. What we're going to do is connect Firebase to it, and we're going to end up with something similar to this right here. So we'll be able to set events from Firebase, or set, they'll be stored in Firebase. We'll be able to also edit the events. We'll be able to delete them. We'll be able to view by day, view by week, month, view by 4 days, and then we'll also be able to switch through the days or the month, whatever view we're in, we'll be able to switch through that. All right, so that's what we'll be building. Let's go ahead and start off by creating our database in Firebase. So for Firebase, if you're not familiar with it, it's a complete platform. I think it's fantastic for small to medium-sized apps. It gives you a NoSQL database. If you want, you can use file storage, you can use authentication, they have hosting, so it's just an all-in-one platform, and it's really great for, like I said, small to medium-sized apps. Perfect for something like this. So you just need to be logged in with Google, and then just go to console. Click up here, because Firebase is obviously owned by Google. And then what we're going to do is create a new project. So we'll say add project, and let's call this Vue-Calendar. And we'll go ahead and continue. And I'm not going to enable Google Analytics for this. And then create project. Okay, so our project's ready. We'll click continue. And now what we want to do is go over to the side here and go to database. And we're going to create a new database. We're going to use the Firestore, which is the next generation of their real-time database. So we'll say create database. And we're going to go ahead and start in test mode, because if we do locked mode, we're going to need to authenticate with Firebase to read and write. And we don't want that. We're not going to deal with Firebase authentication. So we're going to say start in test mode. And then from here, we'll just click done. And it should create our Firestore. And what we'll do is we'll add a couple events through Firebase, and then we'll start on our application, and we'll be able to fetch those events through the app. All right, so from here, we're going to create a collection. If you're not familiar with NoSQL, it's basically, instead of tables, we have something called collections. And in our collection, we have documents. Each record is known as a document, and they're similar to JSON objects, where we have key value pairs. So let's say start collection, and the collection ID we're going to call cal event, and click next, and then we're going to just generate an ID, an auto ID, because each document needs a unique ID. And then let's add a name field. So the type will be string, and then for the value, let's just say doctor's appointment. Okay, so we're adding actual events here. The next field I want is details, which will be a string, and we'll just say Dr. Williams at 1:00 p.m. Okay, and then we're going to want a start date, because the events will be able to span multiple days if you want. So in here, let's do 2019 dash, and let's see, what is today's date? Today's the 14th, so we'll do 10-14. And then we also want an end date. Now this is a single day, so we'll do the same date here, 10-14. And then the last field that we want is a color, because we want these to be color coded. So I'm going to use hexadecimal, so we want to put a number sign here, FF8080. And we'll go ahead and save that, and we should get an event saved in our database. All right, so let's create one more. So add document, and this is for name, let's say business trip, and we'll say details business trip to San Francisco, and let's do start. So for the start date, we'll say 2019-10, and you can change the date if you want to whenever you're watching this. Let's do let's see, we'll do like 20. And then for the end, let's do 2019-10-24. And then for the color, we'll set that to hexadecimal 004080. And save. And now we have two documents, two events in our database, and we should be all set. So now we just want to go back to, our basically our home page for this project, and then right here you can see where it says web. We're going to click on that and just put the title in here, View Calendar, and you can set up hosting if you want. I'm not going to, so we'll just register app, and then it's just going to give us a bunch of information that we're going to need to plug into our app. So all this stuff right here, this Firebase config object. So now we're ready to start building our application. So I'm going to open up a terminal or Windows command prompt, whatever it is you're using, and we need to install the Vue Cli, which is the command line interface, and we need to install it globally. So I'm going to say npm install -g and then at Vue/CLI. Okay, so this is going to install it globally on our system, and then we can use the Vue command to do things like create a new application. Okay, so now that we have that installed, let's go ahead and run Vue create, and we'll call this View-Calendar, and it should, let's choose default here. So it should create a folder for us called View Calendar with all of the, basically the boilerplate Vue files that we need. Okay, so that's all set. Now let's cd into View Calendar, the folder that it created, and if we do an ls, you can see our folder, our source folder, and all the other files. There are some dependencies we want to install though. So first, let's add Beautify, and we can add it as a Vue plugin by doing Vue add Beautify. And this will install it. It'll also initialize it, and it'll actually add some code for us. So we're going to just choose default here. And then once that's done, we have two dependencies that we want to install with npm. So let's go ahead and run npm. Actually, I'm just going to do sudo npm install. And we want to install Firebase, of course, so that we can interact with our Firestore database. And then we're also just going to use this small package called View Text Area Auto Size. And that will do just that. When we add the details, it'll auto size with the text. Why didn't this work? Did I spell it wrong? Yes, I did. Text area. All right, so now we're all set. I'm going to open up this folder in VS Code, and I'm also going to run the server with npm run serve. Okay, and that should start our server on ports 80, I think it's 8080, although I think that's taken on my system, so it'll probably be 8081. All right, so our server is now running, and we have VS Code open with our View Calendar folder. So let's go ahead and visit HTTP localhost and port 8081 in my case, and you can see we get the Beautify homepage. and that's because we added Beautify as a plugin, so it actually initialized it and it created this landing page for us. All right, so first thing we want to do here is go into our source folder, and in our main.js we want to initialize a couple things. So get rid of that. So first of all, Beautify is already brought in, it's already initialized, it's passed into the Vue instance. So let's bring in View text area auto size and initialize that. So we'll say import View text area auto size and set that to oops, not require. I've been doing too much Node lately. Import that from View dash text area auto size, and then we simply need to call view.use and pass that in. All right, now let's bring in Firebase. Now we could do import Firebase from Firebase, but if we do that, we're going to get a console warning that tells us we're bringing in everything, and we shouldn't. We should only bring in what we need, because we're not using authentication, we're not using storage, file storage, or anything like that. So what we can do is do Firebase/app, and then right underneath, just import inside quotes Firebase/Firestore, because that's all we need is the Firestore. All right, and then we'll go down here and let's call Firebase dot initialize app, and then this is going to take in an object with all that stuff that I showed you before. If we go back to this page, this Firebase config, we just want everything that's in here, and obviously you want to use your own, not what I have here. So we'll paste that in. All right, and then lastly we need to export a variable called db and just set this to Firebase.Firestore, and then what we can do is import this into any file we want, and we can then use our Firebase Firestore. Okay, so this file should be all set. We can close that up, and now if we look in our app.view, it just has some boilerplate stuff here. This is the Beautify stuff that you saw. I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of this V app here. I just want the template, the V content. I'm sorry, I do want the V app like that. So V app, V content, and then we're not using this dummy hello world component. We're actually going to have a component called calendar, which will come in from component/calendar, and then we just want to enable it down here. Okay, so we'll save that. Now let's go into components, and we can just completely delete the hello world, and let's create a new file called calendar.view. Okay, and in here we're going to need our template, and then we need our script. And I would definitely suggest, if you're using Vue.js, to use the Viter, where is it? The Viter extension right here, because this will give you like syntax highlighting. It'll allow you to use emit and stuff like that. So definitely would recommend this if you're using Vue with VS Code. So in the template for now, let's just put an H1 and calendar just to get something showing. And now if we go back to our application, let's see. Oh, we didn't embed it. Up here in the V content, we want to embed our calendar. All right, so there we go. We just have an H1, and let's open up our Chrome tools over here and get the console up. Good. Now, as far as the markup, or I should say the template, I'm going to just grab it from, or we're going to start off with what they have as an example here in the calendars component documentation. So down at the bottom, you'll see this right here. And if we click on the source code, we have a template and script to give us basically what is just the front end, and it has a bunch of hard-coded events, as you can see here. So we're going to use this as a starting point. I already tried to do this tutorial with typing everything out, and it took forever, and it's just repetitive. So I'm gonna grab this template here. So if you're following along, you can just grab the whole thing. Okay, whoops. And then we'll just kind of go over it and what each of these components mean and some of the methods that are being called and so on. So back in our calendar component, let's just paste this template in. And if we save it just like this, and we go to our application, it's not going to work. We have a bunch of errors here. And we're going to have errors for quite a bit just because the methods aren't created yet, stuff like that. But let's go over this before we do anything. So with Beautify, if you've never used it before, it gives you a bunch of custom components. It has its own little grid system, kind of like Bootstrap. So what we're doing is creating a row with a fill height for a class, which will fill the whole height of the row. And then a vcall, so we're just going to have one column and everything is going to be inside that. Okay, inside there we have something called a sheet. And a sheet is kind of like a container. You put other components on it. And if you go to the documentation for Beautify, you can see over here on the side, sheets. So any component that you see that you want to learn more about, you can just open that up here and it will give you an example. It'll give you examples. It'll give you the props, different props, events, slots, and stuff like that, so you can read all about it. This isn't a full Beautify course, but you can learn a lot in these docs. So we have a sheet, and on this sheet we have a toolbar. Okay, so a toolbar is like a nav bar, and we have a bunch of buttons here. The first button is to set it to the current day. Okay, so we have a click event here at click, and then set today. All right, underneath that we have two buttons. One is going to call previous, one is going to call next, and they just have these chevron icons. So basically this is right here, so these two. So this will call next, this will call previous, and those are methods that we're going to have to create. Okay, underneath that we have a toolbar title with the actual title. That's going to be this, which is going to be different depending on what the type or what the view is. Okay, so you can see that changes, and we're actually going to have a computed property for that, because that's going to be different depending on whatever view we're looking at. All right, then we just have a spacer. Then we have this V menu, okay, which wraps around all this stuff. So the V menu is actually this, okay, so day, week, month, 4 days. So we can choose the type here, and that's what this is. All right, you can see we have a list with list items, and when we click one of these, it just changes the type property to day, week, month, or 4 day. So type is something we're going to have in our state or in our data for this component. We're also going to have this type to label, because we need a label for each of these for day, week, month, 4 day, and so on. All right, so that's that. And then underneath that we have another sheet. So under the sheet that holds the toolbar, we have the sheet that holds the calendar. Okay, there's an actual Vcalendar component, and that is basically this whole thing right here. All right, and this takes in a bunch of props. So you can see we have a reference of calendar. vModel is going to bind it to a piece of data called focus, which is going to be basically the today's date. And then the colors, primary, you can mess with that if you want. Events is going to be an array of events. In the example that we're just looking at, it's just a hard-coded array, but we want ours to come from Firebase. We have event color, which we're setting to a method called getEventColor, because we want to have different colors for each event. Now is going to be set to today, which is going to be a property, or I should say a piece of state in our component. The type, which will be month, week, day, 4 day, and so on. And then we have some events. So we have different kind of click events. So if we click on the actual event, that references this right here. So if I click that, that's calling show event. Okay, if I click on this date or this more, this is click date, this is click more, and you can see in our code we have click more and click date are both calling a method called view day. Okay, so these are all methods that we're going to have to create. And then the change event represents this here. When we go ahead and change this, whether it's the month or whether it's the day, that's going to be the change event. All right, so that's Vcalendar. And then underneath that, we have this V menu, which is going to be the selected event. Okay, so it's going to be bound to this selected open, which is going to be a true or false. If it's true, this will be open. If it's false, it won't. And then we have our selected event where we can output the name and details and stuff like that. So basically this right here, which we're going to change up. For instance, we're going to have a delete button here. We're going to have an edit here. We're going to get rid of these. And we're also going to have a text area so that we can click right in here and edit it. Okay, so that this will be a little different, this part here. And then that's it for now. We're going to add some other stuff like a new event button where it opens up a dialog to add a new event. But I think we can work with this for now. So let's go down to our script, and we need to add some stuff in here, including our data. So data is just a function. So we're just going to set this to an arrow, and we're going to return an object. Okay, and then we just want to have all the different properties or the state for this component inside this data function. So first thing we'll have is today. Okay, so today is plugged into the Vcalendar right here as the now prop. All right, so to get today's date, we can simply do new date, and we want this in ISO format, so we're going to say to ISO string. Now this will give us the day and time. However, we only want the date, like the 2019 dash whatever. So what we'll do is we'll use the substring or substr method here and say we only want the first 10 characters. There should be a comma. All right, and then we're going to copy this down, and then we're going to have the same value for focus. We want it to focus on today's date by default. All right, and then the type is going to be basically the view, and we want it to be month by default. Okay, then we have type to label. So this is going to be an object where the key is the actual type, and then the value is the label. So month, week, day, and then there's also a type called for day. So we actually want to put that in quotes and say for day. And for the label, we'll say 4 days. Okay, so that's type to label. Now each field of the event we need to have in here, like the name, and these are going to be set to null by default. So name, details, start. Remember, this is the stuff we have in Firebase, and color. But color, we'll set a default here. So let's do hexadecimal 197.6D2 as our default. Okay, now when we edit an event, it's going to change up the UI a little bit because it's going to add a text area. We're going to have a save button. So we need to know if an event is being edited and which one it is. So we're going to have a currently editing value, and by default this is going to be null, but if we're actually editing an event, the ID will go into here. Okay, now we also need to know which event is selected, so we're going to set selected event and just set that to an empty object by default. And the way this calendar works, we need to know the DOM element as well, so we want selected element, which is going to be null by default. Okay, and if it's open or not, so selected open, which will be set to false, and that just represents if this right here is open or not. Right now it's set to true, and when it's not, it's set to false. Okay, so in addition to that, of course we need our events, which is going to be an array of events. You could hard code some events here, but we're going to be fetching ours from Firebase, so we'll start with an empty array. And then we're going to have a dialog set to false, and that just represents the new event modal or dialog pop-up, which is going to be false by default because it's going to be closed. Okay, now let's go ahead and let's save this for now and see if the calendar actually shows, which it does. Okay, so the calendar's showing. Now we're still going to get a bunch of errors because there's a whole bunch of methods that are being called that we haven't created yet. Not being called, but are set in the code. So let's get our events from Firebase just so they can display on the calendar. And those are going to be put into here. I'm sorry, this should be an S, events. Okay, so underneath the data, we're going to use the mounted lifecycle method. So mounted gets called when the when the component is mounted, and we're going to call a method called getEvents. All right, now to create a custom method, we create a methods object, and then we put our methods in here, and we want one called getEvents. And this is where we're going to work with Firebase. Now, in order to work with Firebase, we need to import our database. So inside curly braces, let's import db from @ meaning just the root of our app, and then the main.js file. Okay, now this Firebase object that we have, it returns promises. So instead of using the .then syntax, I'm going to use async await. So we want to label this function asynchronous. Okay, and then to work with Firebase to get our documents, we need to get what's called a snapshot, and we can do that by getting from the collection. We can do db.collection and then .get. Now this is going to return a promise, so we need to await this. We also need to pass in the collection name, which I called cal event. All right, so that will get the snapshot. What we want to do next is loop over the snapshot and get each document. And we're going to initialize an array here called events that will basically what we'll do is we'll loop through, and then we'll push the event into this array on each iteration. Now before we do that though, well, let's do the loop first. So snapshot dot for each, and this takes in a function, and it's going to take the doc as a parameter. And then for now, I just want to console log doc just to show you what we get. Okay, so this should run automatically because we called it in the mounted lifecycle method. So let's reload and then look down at the bottom here. So this is what doc gives us, and what I want you to take note of is the ID, because that's something we definitely need. We also need the data, which you can see is not in a property here. It's actually in the prototype inside of a function called data, or a method called data. So if I go ahead and I do console log doc data parentheses, and then we take a look down at the bottom, now you can see we actually get each event minus the ID. The ID is not in the data prototype, in the method. So what we'll do is inside this loop, let's go ahead and say let app data equals doc.data, which is everything but the ID, and then we'll take app data and add the ID by setting it to doc.id. All right, and then finally we just want to take that events array that we just created and push onto it each document or each app data. And then underneath the loop, we're going to set this .events, which pertains to this right here, the events in the data or the state, and set that to events. All right, so now that should be set, and if we check out our calendar, we have our events being displayed because they're being passed in up here in the Vcalendar right here. Events, we're binding it to the events data. So hopefully that makes sense. And this could come from anywhere. It could come from like an API that uses Express and MongoDB. You know, it could come from anywhere. We're happening to use Firebase, but it could be anything. It could be just hard-coded. Any events you could just plug into that calendar. All right, so now that we've done that, let's do the event color. Notice we have this, we're binding event color to get event color. So that's pretty simple. So we'll just add that to our methods, which will go under get events. And let's say get event color, which takes in the actual event or that specific event. And we just want to return event.color because that's part of the data. And now if we look, now we have those colors. So the next thing I want to do is the show event. So if we click on this right here, we want that pop-up. So we can actually go back to the docs here, and this calendar, if we look at the script, it has and a lot of the stuff we're doing is going to be the same as it is here. This just obviously doesn't have the Firebase stuff. So whereas right here, show event. So we're just going to grab this show event here. So it starts here, ends here. Actually, we could grab the update range as well. Actually, you know what? Let's just grab everything that that we can use. So from view day down to this very last nth method, we can use this. So I'm going to copy that, and then it includes get event color, so we'll just paste that in. All right, so I'll just save this, and I'm just going to go over this real quick. So the show event actually gets passed in an object, and we're destructuring it. We're taking out the native event, meaning the actual JavaScript event, because we need that. We need the DOM element, and then the actual calendar event. So here we're just creating a function called open, where when called, it adds the selected event, or it adds the current event to this selected event property, which is in our data right here. Okay, now in order for the way this works is we need to set the selected element as well, and we can get that from the native event that's passed in and just get the target. That'll give us the actual DOM element. Okay, and then here we're just running set timeout with it just adds a little delay to whatever we do here, and we're just doing a 10 millisecond delay, and then we're setting selected open to true. Okay, because remember when we're looking at the selected event, when we click and we get that pop-up, that selected open is true. Now down here we're just seeing if selected open is true. If it is, then we're setting it to false, and then we're going to open, which will then set it to true. Okay, if this is already true. If not, then we simply call open, and then we just call stop propagation, which will do just that on the native event. So let's go ahead and save this, and now if we go back to our application and we click on one of these, we get the little pop-up. So selected open is now set to true, and then selected event contains this actual event. If I click on this one, selected open is now true, and the event is now this business trip event. All right, now if we click on the day here, let me just show you in the Vcalendar. So if we click on right here, click date or click more, if there's a more button, basically if there's enough events on the same day, you'll see a more button automatically. If we click on either one of those, it calls view day, and down here for view day, it simply sets the focus to the date that's passed in here, and then sets the type to day, because by default we're viewing the month. So if I click here, it just goes to the day, and then this still works. Okay, so it just calls, calls that open function and sets all the selected open and selected event stuff like that. So we can change this and go back to month. We can view by 4 days, by week, and so on. So we get a lot of functionality here with very little code, very little JavaScript. Let's see, set today is simply going to set the focus to the today value. So if I go to day view, actually let's just click on like the 18th, and then I click on this today, it brings me right back to today. So that's what that does. Okay, what else we got here? Previous and next, we're going to use the calendar API, which has a method called previous and next. So this is basically done for us. If we click this here, it calls next, and it goes to the next month. Now, we don't have our title here. That's something we're going to have to add. We can probably do that now. So if we go to the script here, and we check out the computed. So basically in Vue.js, you can create a computed property, and we're setting this title to a computed property based on a bunch of different things here. And this ends down here. So we have a month formatter because we have part of the calendar API is this get formatter, and we can set it to like, the full word December or just DEC and so on. And then we also want to make it so we can have like first with 1 ST or third 3 RD, and that's where this nth method comes in. It's going to look at the day that's passed in. If it's greater than 3 and it's less than 21, it's going to use TH, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, all the way up to 20th. Okay, but then we have 21, which would be 21st, which would be this ST. So then we'll pass in this array here. And then that nth method is getting called like right here. So start day equals start day plus this dot nth, and then we pass in the day. Okay, so we get the correct suffix. Suffix, I think that's what it's called. Yeah, suffix year. And then here we're just doing a switch, looking at whatever the type is. If it's a month, then we want to return the month as the title, or I should say the month and the year. If it's a week or 4 day, then we want the month, the start day, start year. So let's just grab this whole computed property here. So including the month formatter. So this ends right here, right above mounted. Okay, so we'll copy that. I definitely didn't want to type all that out. And then we'll put this right above mounted. All right, and it's affecting the title, which the title we're displaying right here in the toolbar. So let's save this, and then let's go back. Okay, now if we go right to our application, there's nothing here, but if we go to the next, now we get November 2019, December, January 2020, and so on. And if we're in like week view, it shows, the month, the day, the year, and then whatever the range is. Okay, and it does it all automatically. Now this is kind of close to this, so I'm actually going to add a helper class just to add some margin to this button. So if we go, let's see, where is it? Chevron, right, this V button right here, I'm just going to add class mr-4, and then that should push it over a little bit. Yep, there we go. Okay, that looks better. So we'll go back to today. Let's go to month view though. All right, and then we're just getting this message that says full width has been removed. You can safely omit it. So I guess we can get rid of, where did we use full width? Right here. So this V menu right here, we can omit that, and that will get rid of that warning for us. It should. Okay, so now we have no warnings or errors. The next thing I want to touch on is let's handle this, because this pop-up right here is going to be different, and we also want to add the functionality to edit and delete. And then once we do that, we'll add a button up here to add a new event, which will open up a dialog and then add a new event to Firebase. All right, so let's go up to the V menu, which is the pop-up. Where is it? Right here. So this whole V menu right here is what I just showed you, that pop-up. You can see the pencil icon and all that stuff. The event color is set here. The details, the event selected event name, and so on. So this opens up when select open is true, because it's bound right here with this V model. And we want to just change the look of this a little bit, and we need to make it so we can edit it and so on. This icon here I'm going to change to delete, because this is where I want the delete icon. And on this V button right here, we're going to have a click event, and we're going to set that to delete event, and then we just want to pass in the selected event ID like that. Okay, so we'll create that in a little bit. Now down here we have, let's see, our V toolbar title with the event name. That's fine. We don't need the heart icon button or this right here. We can get rid of those two things. Okay, and then in the v text is where we want to add our form. So I'm going to get rid of this, and inside v text, let's say form, and let's first handle if it's not selected. So basically, if we're not editing, so we'll say we'll do a v-if directive here, and we're just going to say if currently editing. Remember, this value is null by default, and if we're editing, it's going to contain the ID of that event. So if it's not equal to the selected event ID, then inside here, let's just show the details. So we'll just say selected event.details. Okay. Now underneath that, we're going to have another form tag with a v-else. Okay, and what I mean by else is this. So if it is, in fact, if currently editing is equal to the selected ID, then we want to have a text area. Actually, we don't need all this crap though. So we're going to have a text area, but remember we installed that package called text area view text area auto size. We're going to use that simply by adding text auto size like that. All right, and then we can pass in here some props. Okay, we don't want anything inside the tags, but in here in the props, we want to bind this to the details property of the selected event. So selected event dot details. All right, and we'll just say type. Type is going to be text, and let's do style equals, and we can just pass in here width 100%, and we'll give it a min height, so we can do colon min height here, just changing the look of it. Min height 100, and then let's add a placeholder of add note. All right, so I'm trying to keep this as close to the actual code in the repository as I can. All right, so if we save that and we take a look, if we click here, so we have our delete button, and then here we have our form. Now we're not in edit mode, so what we'll do is we'll add a button down here to basically switch it to edit mode. So in our Vcard actions, we're gonna keep this. So this is just to, when we click it, it'll set selected open to false, which will just close it. So let's change that to close, and then we'll copy this down. So for this V button here, let's get rid of the color. We do want to keep the text because that's just the style of the button. It looks like regular text, and we need a condition here. So let's get rid of that, and let's add a v-if. So we're going to say if the currently editing is not equal, same condition we have up top, if it's not equal to the selected event ID, then we want to show an edit button because it's not in edit mode, so we need a way to get it into edit mode. So we'll have a click event here. Let's say click, and we're just going to do click prevent, which will just prevent the default behavior. Click.prevent, and we're going to set that to a method called edit event, and we want to pass in the selected event. Okay, and this should be in quotes here, oops, here and here. Okay, so that's our edit button. And then let's see, underneath that V button, we're going to have a save button for when we are in edit mode and we need to save it. So let's actually, we'll just copy that V button. And let's see, we're going to have, instead of v-if, it's going to be v-else. So we simply need to do v else, and it will run if this is not true, which means we're in edit mode. So let's change this to save, and we're going to change, we're still going to pass in selected event here, but we're going to change edit event to update event. Okay, edit event will just put us in edit mode. Update event will actually update the event in Firebase. So let's save that. And if we go back and we take a look, now we have close and edit. Now if I click this, nothing happens. We get an error because edit event is not defined. So let's go down here and let's create edit event. And remember, edit event is just to put us in edit mode. It's not going to deal with Firebase or anything. So let's see, we'll put this, I guess we'll put this like, we'll put it right above show event. So let's say edit event. Make sure you put a comma here as well. Whoops, comma here. And let's see, edit event takes in the selected event, and then we just simply want to set this dot currently editing. We want to set that to the selected event's ID, and that will put us in edit mode. So if we save that and we go back and now we click edit, now we're in editing mode, and notice I can change this, and we have our save button displaying. Now it doesn't do anything, save doesn't do anything. If I reload this, it doesn't save it because we need to add that functionality. So when we click save, if we look up here, when we click our save button, it's going to call this update event. So that's what we want to add next. Now this has to do with Firebase, so I'm going to put this up at the top. So we'll put it right under get events. Okay, I want all the Firebase stuff at the top. So get events ends right here. So let's say update event. Okay, and this is going to be asynchronous since we're dealing with Firebase, which returns a promise. So let's see, we're going to want to await, and we're going to use that DB object and then collection. So basically we need to just select our collection, which is cal event, and then we need to call .doc, and inside here we want the ID of the document we want to edit, and we can get that from currently editing. Okay, this dot currently editing, and then we want to .update, and inside here is where we pass in what we want to update. So we're going to pass in an object, and we just want to update the details. Okay, so we're going to set the details, and this gets passed in the selected event, and we're going to pass in the event details, okay, which will be the updated details after we edit the form. All right, so let's see, once we do that, so we're going to go under this await. Let me just save this. It'll format it just because I'm using auto format. So underneath that, we want to close the selected event. So we'll say this dot selected open, which is true right now. We want to set that to false so that it closes it. And then we also want to set the currently editing back to null. Okay, we don't want that ID hanging around in here, so we want to set that to null. All right, so let's try this out. So let's go to doctor's appointment and edit, and let's change it to, let's say, 3 p.m. and save. So it closes up. We get 3 p.m. If I reload and we go back here, 3 p.m. So it actually updated in Firebase. Okay, so we can do that. Now let's do the delete. The delete is pretty simple. So we already have the button or the icon here, and we click, you can see we get an error because delete event is not defined. So let's define it. We're going to go right under the update and do async delete event, which will get passed in the event, Okay, and then whoops, what did I do? Okay, and in here we're going to await db dot collection, and it's the cal event collection, and then we need to do dot doc, and we just pass in the event, and then we can simply call dot delete. Okay, so it's a pretty simple API that we're dealing with. And then after we delete, so we're going to go right here, we want to set selected open to false, just like we did above. And then I just want to get the events again, so we're going to call this dot get events after we delete. All right, so now let's see, I guess we'll just go ahead and delete our doctor's appointment. So delete, and there we go, it goes away, and if I reload, it's still gone. So the last thing we need to do here is take care of adding a new event. So we're going to add some new markup or some new template. So we're going to go up here to the toolbar, and what we're going to do is have a new event button. So let's put this right above this button here. We'll just grab this and throw that in there, and let's say new event. Okay, and let's say V-Btn. Let's not do outlined. Let's actually do color equals primary, and you can look all this stuff in Beautify. There's a lot of different styles and colors and stuff like that. And let's actually add dark to this as well. Now when this is clicked, okay, so when new event is clicked, we're going to set the dialog property that we have. We want to set that to true, okay, which is, it's false by default, but we want to set it to true. So let's save and just see if that shows up. Okay, so it does. We get new event. When I click that, dialog is getting set to true. Now nothing happens because we haven't set anything to happen yet. But what we want to do is create a V-Dialog component. And if you go to the docs here and you look at dialogs, okay, so it's going to be something like this, and I want it to be a form where we can add a new event. All right, so back here, let's go right under the toolbar sheet. So the toolbar ends here and the sheet ends here. And let's put in, let's say, add event dialog. All right, so we'll add a V-Dialog. And this is going to take in a V model because we only want this to show when dialog is true. So we want to bind this to dialog. All right, we can also set a max width here, and we're going to set that to 500. All right, and then in here we're going to have a Vcard. Just to make it look nice, we'll have a Vcard and then a V container. And then in here we'll have our V form. Okay, now this form, when we submit it, let's do a submit and dot prevent because we don't want it to actually submit. So we want to submit it to a method called add event. Okay, and then as far as the text fields, I'm just going to paste these in just so I don't have to type so much. So we have V text fields, which are just text fields in a form, and we want to set V model to whatever data we want to basically bind this to. So we have our name, type text, label is event name. Then we have our details, our start date, which is the type date, end, which is the type date, and then color, which is going to be type color. So this is going to open up a color palette or a color picker. Okay, and then under that we just need our submit button. So let's say V-Btn. And actually, yeah, we'll say create event, and we need to add some stuff in here. So one is going to be type submit because it's a submit button. We'll say color primary. We'll give it a class of margin right 4, and then when we click this, so I'm going to say click.stop, and when we click this, we want to set dialog to false, which will then close the dialog. All right, so it'll submit the form to this function add event, and it'll also set this to false so that the dialog goes away once we submit. All right, so now the last thing we want to do is add the add event function, which we're going to put down here. Let's put it right below get events and above update event. So async add event. Okay, so this is we're gonna deal with Firebase here as well, because we want to add a new event to our database. So let's first do just a little bit of validation here. So we'll say if this, because we want name and start and end to be required. So in this else here, we'll just do an alert, and we'll just say name, start, and end date are required. And you could handle this more elegantly if you wanted to like create an alert component. Of course you could do that, but this is just going to be a standard alert. All right, if those things are included, then we want to await db.collection, and we're using cal event. All right, and then we can call .add, and then we can pass in an object, and we can set our values. So this .name, details, this .details, start, this .start, end, and we also have color. All right, so that will add it to the database, and then immediately after, I'm just gonna get events again, and then we just want to clear all of our data. So this .name is gonna equal nothing. Just copy this down. So we have name, details, start, end, and color. Okay, so that'll just clear it up. All right, so let's try this out. Let's go back to our application and new event, and we'll just do doctor's appointment. We'll say Dr. Johnson at 11 o'clock a.m. And let's see, for start, we'll say the 16th, end also the 16th. And then if we click on this line, we get a color picker. And we'll just pick, I don't know, this color here. And if we close that up, that should be selected. And then create event. And there we go. Okay. So over here, we're getting the format is, where are the two? Oh, so I think that, yeah, it's talking about when we clear the color value. Let's set the color back to the default. Remember in our data, where is it? Right here. Let's just set it to this. And that should get rid of that warning. All right, so we'll save that. Let's reload this, and we'll just try one more time to add an event. We'll say meeting with, actually let's do a multi-day event. So we'll say vacation in, I don't know, Aruba. Detail. Okay, so we'll do, let's actually span it from like, we'll say October 30th to, let's go to November 4th. Pick a color here and create event. Okay, so now we didn't get that warning over here, and you can see this span. So if I go to the next month, it spans to the 4th. Awesome, and we can edit it if we want. Awesome, vacation in Aruba. Save, and that gets saved. Good. So that's it. Now we have a calendar where we have basically CRUD functionality for events, and we can do all types of different views. If we want to view by week, we can do that. Scroll through it. If we want to view by day, we can do that. If we want to go to today. So, I mean, I think it's, it's a lot of functionality for a small amount of code. So the code for this will be in the description, this GitHub right here. And if you check out JS Fanatics repos, there's actually multiple versions of this calendar. You have the one we just did, and then there's one that uses Vuex with Firebase. There's one that uses the Maven stack if you want to get into like Express and Node, and there's one with Maven and Vuex. So you can definitely check those out as well. All right, so that's it, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this project. If you did, please leave a like, and I'll see you next time.